Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's June 27th, 2025 program, Powering Oregon, a look at state energy strategy. My name's Thomas Hura. I serve as president of City Club. I'm pleased to welcome you to another of the many forums we've held since 1990 in the name of our mission to build community vision through open inquiry. City Club is lucky to be a trusted, open, and independent voice for Eugene area community members to be heard. And as a lifelong Eugenian, I dare say the community is lucky to have the City Club and to hear from our program guests and questions from the audience, whether here in the beautiful Wow Hall, online, or over the radio. We believe these kinds of gatherings around critical community topics strengthen our understanding of one another and ultimately our ability to support the community building work in many sectors of Eugene. In today's fractured information landscape, we want to be a space where you can participate in unearthing, disseminating, and sharing relevant information in conversation together. We would love for you to browse our past programs at cityclubofeugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Do consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our work as the only city club in Oregon that meets weekly. I'm so glad I did so in 2019 because now my name tag acknowledges my starting year and I think it's very fashionable. There are many ways to support and collaborate with us, and I'd like to thank our Platinum and Diamond community sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their generous support as well. And a special shout out to our most recent Sapphire sponsor, Summit Bank. We're proud to do our banking at Summit, and we're grateful for the contributions of Summit's employees to our club and community. A quick reminder to silence all your cell phones in the hall. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to a familiar voice, your friend and mine, Andrew Kallick, the immediate past president of City Club and the coordinator of today's program.
Thank you, Thomas. From data centers powering artificial intelligence to the mass deployment of electric cars and beyond, energy demand in the Pacific Northwest is expected to double in the next 20 years. How will the state meet this growing demand for energy, all while achieving ambitious climate goals, including an economy-wide 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and a 90% reduction in emissions from natural gas, liquid fuels, and propane by 2050, you ask? Well, you're in the right place to find out. The Oregon Department of Energy, ODO, is currently in the process of developing the Oregon Energy Strategy, and we're excited to have two leaders from ODO here today to discuss this effort and take your questions. Edith Bayer is the Energy Policy Team Lead at ODO, where she's leading work on developing a statewide Oregon energy strategy. Edith joined ODO after 5 years at the International Energy Agency in Paris and 9 years at the Regulatory Assistance Project in Vermont and Brussels, Belgium, with a focus on electric markets, utility regulation, and energy efficiency policy. Alan Zelenka is the Assistant Director for Planning and Innovation at ODO, where he works on energy efficiency, renewable resources, sustainable transportation, climate change issues, and energy planning. Alan is also in his 5th term as a Eugene City Councilor representing the neighborhoods around the UO. And last but certainly not least, Alan is a former president and board member of the City Club of Eugene. Edith and Alan, welcome to City Club.
Thank you. I'm Alan Zelenka. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning and Innovation at the Oregon Department of Energy. And as a former president and board member of Eugene City Club, glad to be here. And the City Club provides such an amazing, important, valuable service to our city in the community. Next slide, please. So my group of 36 people, including Edith, in Planning and Innovation, we call ourselves P&I, covers a broad array of energy topics and issues. And we have 4 groups in P&I: the climate group, the energy efficiency group, the codes and standards group, and then the technology and policy group, which Edith is in, which covers renewables, other generation, sustainable transportation, transmission, and planning. The planning part of this group is what there are the folks that are pulling together this Oregon State Energy Strategy. So the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO, has been working on this for, hold on a second, has been working on this for 2 years now. And my colleague, Edith, is the project manager extraordinaire for the energy strategy. She's done a fabulous job of pulling together a broad range of perspectives and input from all across the state, over 100 meetings that we've had related to this. And I wanted to also point out that Director Benner is in the back there. She's here. If you have any hard questions, Janine's the person to ask them of. I also wanted to point out that all three of us, Edith, myself, and Janine, all live here in Eugene, even though ODO's offices are in Salem. So, and because Edith's going to be talking about the energy strategy, but I'll set the stage. And because City Club's so special, we're going to give you a little sneak peek of some of our findings and recommendations before it actually gets published. So you guys get to be a little bit special. Before she does that, I wanted to set the stage a bit about describing the energy landscape in Oregon and give you a bit of a context and foundation about where we are in energy, from which we then built the Oregon energy strategy. So when we talk about energy, we're not just talking about electricity, we're talking about all forms of energy. Electricity, petroleum, oil, natural gas, propane, wood, all forms of energy. So let's start with a question of folks here. How many of you people used energy today? Raise your hand. Okay, put down your hands. Okay, raise your hand if you can remember a day where you didn't use any energy. One person, I like that. I want to hear that story after. It is incredibly critical to modern life. It's essential, as a matter of fact. And the services that all of our energy providers provide is what makes our lives in the modern day go. Next slide, please. So energy is the world's largest industry. $3.3 trillion of money spent on energy. Clean energy, renewables, nuclear grid, storage, low emission fuels, energy efficiency, electrification, and then fossil fuels. And you can see 2.2 trillion on clean energy technologies and 1.1 trillion on fossil fuel energy technologies. So next slide, please. In Oregon, we spend in 2022, $19.5 billion on energy. 0.7 of that was spent on oil, and 5.2 billion was spent on electricity, and 1.3 billion on natural gas. So while we spend about 2/3 of our dollars on oil, transportation actually only accounts for about 1/3 of all the energy use, and then about 1/3 for electricity and about 1/3 for our direct use fuels like natural gas. So energy is a big deal in Oregon. It's a pretty big part of it. It's 6.9% of our GDP. This graphic is, next slide, please. This slide. This graphic's actually from our biennial energy report. It's one of my favorites. We call it Sankey the Squid. And what it is, it shows Oregon's energy flow. Those listening at home, you can go to our website at ODO and go to the biennial energy report and see it. On the left, the energy is the energy that we produce. And note that all of our natural gas and petroleum is imported outside of Oregon, and very little is actually produced here. Actually, only that little sliver in the middle, that blue section, about 22% of our energy is actually produced in Oregon. So on the far right of the graph, you'll notice that much of the energy that we use is actually wasted. Like 67% of it is wasted. Over half of it is wasted. That's because our energy system is pretty darn inefficient. But on the flip side, what that means is there's lots of opportunities for improvement and for energy efficiency and the ability to grow. So right in the middle is that red bar, and it says about 40% of energy is in the form of electricity. Next slide, please. This is another graphic from our website. It's called the Energy Resource Mix. And what it shows is what are the sources of electricity in Oregon? This bubble chart that's on the left shows that the energy resource mix for 2022 in Oregon. Mostly hydro, 33%, natural gas at 17%, coal at 13%, wind at 8%, nuclear at 3%, and solar at a little less than 3%. That big brown circle in the center there is actually called unspecified, which means it comes from market purchases, which is a conglomeration of all the different types of sources that are sold on the open market, and utilities can buy that to meet load. Next slide, please. So where are all these electrical generation facilities? This is another slide from our energy resource mix, or ERM, and it shows that where all of the energy resources are in the West and in Oregon. You can see that they're everywhere. They're all over the place. And so it's a very pervasive system. Next slide, please. So we have had a significant increase in population. You can see the top graph, the green graph. You see us having an increase in population over time in the last 20 years. And then the next line down, the blue line or black line, is actually economic growth. So we've had significant increase in population, significant increase in economic growth, but that orange line at the bottom is relatively flat. How could that be? How can we have that much population growth, that much growth economically without increasing our energy supply? Well, the answer is energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So we have been doing energy efficiency for 45 years in the Pacific Northwest and in Oregon. And now it's the second largest resource for electricity behind hydro in the Northwest. And we're saving over $5 billion a year because of the energy efficiency that we've done. We're reducing over 25 million metric tons of CO2, created nearly 40,000 of the 92,000 energy jobs are from energy efficiency in Oregon. Next slide, please. So switching to greenhouse gas emissions, Oregon emits about 59 million metric tons in 2023. And you can see from the graph that comes from all the sectors, and that the transportation, being the largest of all the sectors, accounting for about 35% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Petroleum, natural gas, and electricity from fossil fuels make up the majority of the emissions by source on the graph to the right. So next slide, please. Fortunately, we live in Eugene, and we have EWEB, and a long history and legacy of using renewable power, from hydro to wind to solar. And as you can see from the chart, EWEB has one of the lowest carbon footprints, if not the lowest carbon footprint in the entire state when you compare it to everybody else. It's one of the lowest in the United States. And at 0.080 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour, Pacific Core has 1.186 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour delivered. So next slide, please. So with all that backdrop as a starting point, how do we meet our energy and greenhouse gas emission reduction goals? Does Oregon have an energy and a climate strategy? Yes and no. We have pieces with different state agencies and cities and other entities in the state all combining to craft our direction of trying to get to our greenhouse gas emission goals and our energy goals. But we don't have an overarching strategy, guiding strategy with principles and actions that will help us all go in the same direction. We're all trying to go in that direction. How do we do that and meet our goals? If we want to meet our energy and climate goals, how do we get most of us to go that way. That's what the energy strategy is all about. How do we get everybody kind of on the same board, many people as you can, to go that way? If we know where we are, the question is, how do we get there? How do we get to where we want to be? And the Oregon Energy Strategy seeks to plot out the least cost pathway to meet our energy and our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. It further lays out a set of strategies that help us set the direction for Oregon and guide Oregon's actions over time, and policies to help us be more specific about what direction we want to go in, and specific actions that help us track progress and make sure that we're moving forward. So strategies, policies, and actions, SPA. We're giving the Oregon Energy Strategy the SPA treatment. So E is here to talk about the more in depth about where we're going, where we have been, where we're going, and where we are with the Oregon strategy. And she'll finish off with a sneak peek of the 5 strategies that we're proposing. Edith? Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here and to have biked over because, as Alan mentioned, I am a resident of Eugene along with Alan, but he's not my city councilor. I live in a different part of the city. So as Alan mentioned, we have, I'm going to talk about the energy strategy. We've been working on this for 2 years. I'm just going to start off by saying we don't have all the solutions and all the answers. Nobody does. But we have been doing a lot of work to inform kind of how we get from here to there. So I'm just starting off with this slide to kind of ground us all in why we're doing this, why the Oregon Department of Energy is doing this. There's a statute, House Bill 3630, a bill that that directs the Oregon Department of Energy to lead development of a state energy strategy that identifies pathways to achieving the state's energy policy objectives. And as Alan mentioned, they're kind of all over the place. There are state level objectives, there are local objectives, and they cut across all sectors. They cover transportation, electricity, but there's a lot of separation there. And so one of the big challenges here is to figure out how we create a vision that combines all of these sectors, particularly where you see increasing interaction. For example, when you electrify a vehicle, you've gone from relying on petroleum for transportation to relying on electricity. So there's all sorts of really interesting stuff like that happening in the background. The bill asks us to do a few things. So here's kind of a quote that highlights the main thing. In addition to identifying pathways to achieving our energy policy objectives, we're also tasked with developing policy recommendations and with doing all of this informed by robust engagement. So by engaging early, often with as many people with lived and professional expertise from across Oregon as possible. Next slide, please. So this is just to sum up everything that we've been doing. On the left, you can see sort of all of the work that's gone in to inform essentially what's going to be a report that we submit to the governor and legislature on November 1st of this year. So we conducted a bunch of analysis. We did a big modeling study that I'm going to talk about a little bit in a moment. We did an analysis we called the Energy Wallet to understand how those high-level modeling results might shake out for households in Oregon who are using different fuels or living in different types of housing today. We did some air quality modeling also, building off of the energy sector-wide modeling. We have some geospatial maps to help us understand what's happening in different parts of the state. And we'll be presenting results of a job study in August that we've also undertaken, which also builds on that modeling. So lots of information. We're trying to build a really good information base to help us think this through. And then you can see that we have several ways that we've been engaging with folks. We have an interagency steering group. We have been consulting with tribes, and we have some other groups in here that you can see on the screen. And then ultimately, all of this is kind of funneling through our team, and we're working right now on a draft that we're going to submit for public comment probably around mid-August. And then there'll be that opportunity to hear how we did with everything that we've heard so far. Next slide, please. So I don't know how many people in the room here, I can't see virtual hands, but physically in the room are familiar with modeling exercises, have I don't know if you could raise your hand just to get a sense of the room. Okay, so quite a few people. That's great. So I just want to describe modeling at kind of a very simple level to bring everybody along. So this is a model train set here. A model is not that much different. It's kind of a version of the world. So we had consultants, Evolved Energy Research and the Clean Energy Transition Institute, contracted to conduct economy-wide modeling. So essentially taking the whole energy system, all of our transportation, how we use energy in homes, in industry, and kind of look at how we use energy today, where we use it, how we supply it, what we supply it with, and then how that might change over time, and what we need to change over time to meet our energy policy objectives. And so that modeling was, part of the engagement process was to inform this modeling, and essentially what it gave us was an idea of what a least cost pathway might look like for our state out to 2050, as well as kind of what alternative pathways look like and what some of the costs might be of doing things differently. And finally, I just want to say this is not by any means predicting the future. No model can predict the future, but it does produce valuable insights to help us really think through, do we have the right policies in place? What might we need to change? What might we need to beef up to help implement maybe some of the more tricky policies that we have? So the modeling is really a tool. It's a foundation to engage in policy discussion. So to give you a sense, last year, most of the year was dedicated to this modeling exercise, and we presented results in January. And since January, we've been engaging in discussions on, well, okay, so here's some directional feedback information. What do we do with this? Where are the problems? Where are the barriers? And what might some solutions look like? So that's kind of what our jobs have looked like over the past couple of years. So this is just a reminder here of what the energy strategy modeling is and isn't. Some people in here might be familiar with utility modeling, and this is quite different, so it's important to distinguish. So first, the modeling is really there to understand some of the trade-offs and the interactions between sectors and different pathways and different ways of meeting our objectives. It's pretty exciting to have a model that looks across sectors because it's actually not something that you see that often. It's the kind of tool that's used for this kind of exercise. But across Oregon, when utilities do planning, for example, they're looking at their service territory, whereas we looked at all of Oregon. The modeling does look at not just how we meet our clean objectives, but how we meet them reliably and how we meet them at least cost, and provided, as I said, a foundation for some of that complementary analysis that I mentioned before. We're not forecasting the future. This is kind of a different exercise from utility modeling, but hopefully can inform kind of utility perspectives. It's not a transmission planning model. We've gotten the question a lot, so this does not list response to a lot of the kinds of questions that we've heard. So there are utility-specific analyses and exercises that we're not trying to replace in this exercise, and that are really important and should be complementary to what we're doing here. And finally, we've gotten a lot of questions about how much needs to be built in Oregon and where. So we can get a sense of scale of how much, but we're not going to get a sense of exactly where from this model. So let's see. I've totally gone off script here, so I have to figure out where I am. So the modeling, essentially there are four key areas that are interrelated with each other and that together kind of drive us towards where we need to get in our energy sector. So you can see those pillars here. Energy efficiency, Alan has already mentioned how important energy efficiency is. Electrification plays a really big role in how we decarbonize at least cost. Clean electricity, we already have policies driving towards clean electricity, and as Alan showed, we already live in a really pretty clean service territory. And low carbon fuels play a really important role as well. You can't electrify everything. There are sectors that are kind of the hardest to electrify sectors where you need to rely on fuels. And over time, it'll be important to transition to clean fuels. So the way the modeling was structured, we had a reference scenario, which is kind of the starting point. that we defined with kind of a hypothesis of what a least cost path would look like. And that wasn't guesswork. There a lot of analysis and discussion went into how to define that reference scenario. And two of the keys in that least cost pathway are high levels of energy efficiency and electrification. So electrification of transportation and also in buildings. And then we modeled a whole bunch of other scenarios, and essentially each other scenario, we turned a lever in each of the other scenarios. So one way to think about it is asking what if questions. So we have our reference scenario that says, here's how you get there. And then we say, well, what if electrification is slower? Or what if we do less energy efficiency? What if we relied more on distributed energy resources? What if we relied less on resources built in Oregon and decided that we wanted to import more so we don't have to build as much in our state? So those are the kinds of questions that we asked our modelers to figure out for us. When we undertook this modeling, we're focused on Oregon, but you can't really separate our energy sector. You can't really evaluate our energy sector if you don't take into account that we're part of a grid that covers the Western United States, that our gas and oil are subject to global markets. And so our modeling took all of that into account. And then Oregon, for electricity purposes, was divided into two zones. This gets a little wonky. Maybe some people will appreciate this. It's really hard to build transmission across the Cascades. So we just wanted to take that kind of physical reality into account when we were doing the modeling, so it wouldn't be unrealistic about where we can build and how we're going to meet our energy policy goals. So I'm just going to show a few results, not many, but I think that they're helpful to ground sort of the directional insights that we got from the modeling. So this is, if I were to only show one slide, it would be this one. So left side is 2024, and that's data on how we were actually using energy in 2024. And on the far right is 2050. So there are 5-year kind of time resolution here. And each of the colored bars represents a different fuel. So yellow is electricity, and then all those different shades of gray are different fossil fuels, and then there's a bit of steam and jet fuel there in the middle. And so there are two things that are really important to take away from this slide, and this is from that reference scenario, that least cost scenario. One is that we get a lot more efficient. So the total size of the energy pie, of the energy that we need to supply our economy, drops by 22%, smaller pie. So that's a really positive insight from the modeling. And we also see that yellow bar gets much bigger. So we see electricity demand doubling. And that really is a reflection of the role of electrification and where those opportunities for electrification are, where it's less costly to electrify compared to finding those more scarce and less available low-carbon fuels that really the modeling showed us we need to be really tactical about and apply in those areas where we really need them and where we don't have another option. So a little bit more detail behind that. So this is, again, 2024 on the far left, 2050 on the far right, but the bars are showing something different. The bars are showing demand sectors. So it shows how we're using energy. And I just want to point 3 things out here. On the right-hand side of the slide, at the top, you can see a text box that points to the purple. Those are data centers and chip fabrication facilities, and they grow significantly. They're the biggest driver of electricity demand, particularly in the near term. As we get farther out over time, we just had to estimate what that growth might look like over time, but within the next 5 years, the projections are pretty big. And this is for Oregon. At the same time, electrification of cars really reduces energy demand in the transportation sector, along with reducing vehicle miles traveled by offering broader transportation options and availability and access to transportation options. And then the yellow is building electrification and efficiency in homes, and the result of those measures in reducing demand in homes. So those are the kind of big drivers that we see acting on the energy system. We need more generation capacity in electricity if we're going to, again, we're not forecasting the future, but kind of this is all, we're living in the reference scenario here, right? So in that reference scenario, there's a doubling of electricity demand, and that means that we need more resources to meet that demand. So this is just the insight view. We're still importing resources, that continues, but there's a lot of interest in like, well, what might we need to build in Oregon? And here's an idea of which resources shake out as kind of least cost, a least cost mix that ensures reliability for our power system. So hydropower remains a foundational resource. We see a lot of growth in solar, both grid scale and rooftop. We see onshore wind continuing to be an important part of the mix. There's an interesting finding here that I think is a little less certain in terms of the technology, but in the model we found enhanced geothermal coming onto the system and meeting the need for a resource that provides a really high capacity factor, so that just like supplies a lot of electrons throughout the year and is not as intermittent as wind and solar. We don't know whether it's going to be geothermal. There's a bit of a technology race out there, but that was a technology that, based on today's data, won out. And what we'll have to revisit this over time to get a sense of where that some of that competition between technologies like enhanced geothermal. We hear quite a lot in Oregon about offshore wind. Some folks are very interested in nuclear. So those are all technologies that are sort of competing for that slice of a need that we know our electricity system has. And finally, there is some gas that remains in the system. There's some fossil gas that remains, and then there's some clean gas that plays a role in balancing the electricity system. It doesn't run very often, but it's still there. Okay, clean fuels, I just want to touch on those. Again, clean fuels or low carbon fuels are really important. The second bullet here describes what I mean when I say clean fuels. They include things like biogas, bioliquids, e-fuels, things like hydrogen, ammonia, and geothermal steam. It gets pretty wonky and technical here, but I think biodiesel is a good example of a clean fuel that we have in circulation today that we're already using, and that falls under this category. So in that reference scenario, we're still living in reference land, fuel demand decreases significantly, and that's again because of that fuel switching to electricity. But we go from, on the left is 2024, and that gray is fossil fuels, and the green are low carbon fuels. And then you can see on the right that it's almost all low carbon fuels by 2050 if we're to meet our goals, which include the Climate Protection Program, which sets a 90% greenhouse gas reduction goal for transportation and direct use fuels by 2050. So the driver for a lot of the shifts that you're seeing are these policies like the Climate Protection Program that set a very clear target by 2050. Okay, so I'm going to bring us closer to home for a minute. Does anybody in the room have an electric car? And just not to be car-centric, anybody bike to get around? All right, great. So this slide focuses on electric cars and just shows the role that this particular piece of the electrification picture plays. So in 2024, the passenger vehicle fleet has an average of 25 miles per gallon equivalent efficiency. That's how much you're getting out of the mix of electric and internal combustion cars out there. And on the far right, in 2050, with that electrification, you can see how much more energy efficient electric vehicles are. And we end up with an average, kind of a fleet average across all passenger vehicles of 125 miles per gallon equivalent. So it's not just that we're switching fuels, but we're getting much more energy efficient. Okay, here's a picture of homes. So how many of you have undertaken any kinds of energy efficiency measures over the last, I'll just say, period? Okay, and that can be, so I'm sure there's a mix here of weatherization, upgrading your equipment, appliances, maybe a new roof. So all of those measures are included here that were included in the model. And you can see in 2024, it just says 100%. It's 100% of residential energy use in 2024. And in 2050, we see that goes down by 47%. So there's a huge energy efficiency improvement in homes. And again, that's driven by all of these kinds of measures. And I'll just add that electrification is one of those leading energy efficiency measures as well. So I know this is all really wonky, and I'm probably being really wordy. I hope we're okay on time. But I just wanted to note that we're not just talking about how much things cost at an economy-wide level. Is it reliable and is it clean? There are lots of other considerations that have gone into the conversations that we've been having around the energy strategy. And the ones that you see listed here are ones that are listed in the bill that we need to consider. And so it's a good reminder. We often remind ourselves of this flower slide to say, all right, have we thought about land use considerations, natural resource impacts, what all of this means for energy burden, environmental justice, what about resilience? What about the need to adapt to climate change? So these are all things that we've been evaluating as we've been looking at the results from that modeling exercise. Very briefly, and there's more detail about these analyses on the website, but I couldn't help but show this energy wallet slide. I just have a couple of slides, but this was such a cool analysis that taught us so much and made us realize how much we don't know. So we took those results from the economy-wide modeling and we said, okay, so we see that electrification is important. EVs are important, electric heat pumps are important, but we also know that that stuff can be really expensive. And so how do we think about it from a household perspective? So I don't have all the details here, but online we have a presentation that has like a picture of the homes that we, or like a cartoon picture of the sample homes that we evaluated in this analysis. We looked at 5 sample homes and we looked at, if you look at the icons there under affordability factors, we looked at, how far does this household drive? Per year. How much electricity does it use and how much natural gas if it uses natural gas and for what end uses? How much does it pay? So we looked at a range of electricity and gas costs. And where is this home located? Both, is it kind of, primarily we looked at climate zones. So is it a cold climate where you might not need air conditioning? Or is it a climate where, like here, where it gets really hot in summer and it's getting hotter in summer and you might need an air conditioner? So then we looked at, all right, so 5 households, one in a cold climate. If there were 2 or 3 standalone single family homes, there was a multifamily low income urban home. And what does it mean for each of these homes when they buy an electric vehicle and when they buy an electric heat pump? And what does that do to their bill? What does it do to their monthly costs? And it was pretty interesting. There are a number of takeaways. I'm not going to read through all of these in a lot of detail, but I think it's really important to say that all 5 households saved energy, regardless of whether they were using natural gas for heating to start with, how much they drove. They all saved energy, but they didn't all save money. For some of them, it was quite expensive to undertake these measures, and a lot of factors play into how much you might save or have to pay as a household. But this kind of information is really useful to policymakers and I think also to implementers to understand, all right, how do we focus scarce public money to help get us over the line so we can achieve those economy-wide benefits, but not leave households behind. We also undertook some air quality modeling. I only have one slide on this, but the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has a great tool called COBRA. That is an acronym. I won't tell you what it means because I'll mess it up right now. But it essentially allowed us to take our modeling results and plug them in and see how that shift from fossil fuels to clean affects air quality, and particularly criteria pollutants, which are like the harmful pollutants for public health. And we found that the benefits are really big. The benefits were measured in terms of things like reduced hospitalization days, reduced lost work days, and also reduced mortality. And most of the benefits came from reduced mortality because that's quantified in the model, and pretty interesting results showing that there are health benefits to these measures in addition to climate benefits. So this is the preview Alan was telling you about. So I've just walked you through all of the modeling, which felt really important because, first of all, it's really interesting, and this is the City Club, and something tells me that you all are interested in this kind of stuff. But also, it all informs our thinking in thinking through, okay, so we have a set of policies in place as a state. We have information on how we're doing. Alan was showing some of that. But we know that we have to do more to get to those 2050 goals, and that it's going to get pretty hard. So all of that analysis has helped us think through what we need to do. And now we've been working to define the SPA, as Alan said, those high-level strategies, like what's the strategic direction we need to take, what are some high-level policies to help kind of define that direction more specifically, and then what are some near-term actions that we should really focus on? And those near-term actions are really focused on the next 4 or 5 years. It's really near-term. But these strategies that I have up on the screen right now are that highest level and are meant to be guiding us over time. So the modeling went out to 2050 so that we could have a vision. We'll certainly have to course correct over time. There are a lot of changes happening right now. And so on a policy level, technologies are evolving. And so there's a lot that we don't know, but we know enough to say that these 5 areas are really important. And I'm just going to elaborate on them briefly. And then, sorry, I've not been watching time, so I hope I'm not way over. So we have here energy efficiency. And again, energy efficiency, Alan showed, already is a really important resource to our system. It becomes even more efficient over time. And so advancing energy efficiency needs to be one of our strategies. And the way that we have framed this is that we're talking about energy efficiency in buildings, in industry, but also in transportation from that perspective of providing broader transportation options that can replace some of the car time on the road, making transportation also more efficient. And really the saying that I often have in my head is that, the cleanest energy is the energy that you don't use. Electrification is next. So again, electrification here refers to electrification in buildings, in industry, where it's possible, and in transportation. Clean electricity really refers to the whole shebang. We're talking about, the big utility scale stuff like transmission and large utility scale, solar and wind. But we're also talking about distributed electricity. I don't know who here has solar panels on their roof. I'm sure oh wow, lots of people. Cool. I do too in my rental, but I'm moving tomorrow into a house we're buying and there's no solar panels. And we also, another important theme under clean electricity is the role of flexibility. So just think of electric vehicles, those are a lot of batteries, and you can time when you charge that car. If we charge all of our cars at the hottest moment, midday, in summer, that might cause a problem for our power system. But if we charge those cars when renewables are abundant and we're not using very much at night, it can really help the system. And those batteries over time, this is a less developed area, but can also feed electrons back into the system. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening now that's going to change how our energy system and power system function over time. Low carbon fuels are really important in those hardest to electrify sectors. That includes things like shipping, a lot of rail transport, some heavy-duty vehicles, heat-intensive industry. So there are some, aviation is another one. So those are just some areas where we don't see electrification as an option and where we need to reach for those clean fuels. And finally, resilience is really important. So there are a few things that we have in mind here. I mean, first of all, we're all experiencing increased weather extremes, and that's leading to all sorts of pressures. It's leading to increased wildfires, which create a need to harden grids to manage electricity grids in a different way, and is causing increased costs. There's also resilience of your home. If your home hasn't been weatherized and it gets really hot or really cold and the power goes out, the temperature will change really quickly indoors. Whereas if you have a really nicely insulated home, it can be more resilient to some of those weather extremes. And there's also cross fuels coordination. So we saw in January of last year, we had a huge ice storm here in Eugene. There were problems on both the electricity and natural gas systems, and those two systems are interdependent. And so we've also been looking at some of that. So with that, I think I'm just going to put up the question slide that we have. We have a few questions for you, but I think these are just to warm us all up. I imagine you all have questions that you want to ask us, but some things that we had in mind are, what are some of the challenges you hope the energy strategy will address? Are there particular opportunities you think that should be part of the energy strategy? And the third one feels really appropriate for this room, and I'm really curious how you think a state energy strategy can help support our city's priorities and actions. So thanks. I think I'm going to sit now. Is that how we're doing it? Okay, great.
Thank you. We'll begin our Q&A quite soon, but first, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC, for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In Eugene, they broadcast on 89.7 FM. For those listening at home or in the car right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. As one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC, and we truly are honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived on KLCC, as well as on our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. We'll have a short break before returning for questions.
Welcome back to the City Club of Eugene and our forum on the state energy strategy. This is our question and answer session.
Two questions. One is, how much are you focusing on grid enhancement technologies to, instead of more lines, to really increase capacity? That's question one. Question two was sort of related to the Power Act that passed for the large users, particularly AI coming on. Are you looking at, I don't know what term to use, pushing them, encouraging them, legislating them to potentially use geothermal on site? There'd be great advantages for them if that could happen also. And just wondering.
Good question. So on grid enhancing technologies, we, in the model, it was difficult to include all grid enhancing technologies. There are a lot of factors that you need to know to determine conductoring played a very big role and was very important in the modeling. But it doesn't get us all the way there. So we still need to build new. It doesn't get us fully there. We have not talked about requiring data centers to supply themselves with geothermal, but we have been thinking about the role of data centers and that increasing demand and how the energy strategy might help address it.
On data centers, I was at a meeting with my cohorts at our trade association, and somebody came up with a really fun acronym. It was Beyonce, bring your own new clean energy. And I really like that. It's one of the things that people have been talking about, but also where do they end up? How do they end up here? At another national meeting that Janine and I were at, everybody was talking about this in all of their states, which means all of the data centers, there's only going to be a finite number of them, but everybody's thinking maybe we're going to get them all. So there's probably a lot more angst about that than there is going to be actual reality around where they end up. But they are big, and they're huge loads, size of city Eugene type loads, and they will require enormous amount of power. Where we get that power is going to be very critical, and whether or not they can use renewables. Being, like I said before, renewables are where they are, you have to get the transmission to where they are, or you have to build something nearby if you're going to use it. So usually we're not going to build the data centers right next to a geothermal site. Potentially not going to be able to do that. So it's going to be a lot of transmission that's needing to be built. Reconductoring gets us most of the way there, but not all the way. So we'll be able to figure out what kind of power actually feeds those is going to be critically important to whether or not we meet our greenhouse gas emission goals.
I believe that's all the time we have for today. Please give a round of applause for our guest, Edith Bayer Alenka. This has been our June 27th, 2025 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We'll be off next week to observe Independence Day, but we'll be back here at Wow Hall on Friday, July 11th at noon. That program is called Lane County's Deflection Program. What is it, and is it working? It'll be a great forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time at City Club.